Okay, please repeat after me. I state your name. Do hereby solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of Ohio,
the Constitution of the State of Ohio,
and the Charter and laws of the City of Nelsonville, Ohio.
and the Charter and laws of the City of Nelsonville, Ohio.
Faithfully, honestly, and impartially
Faithfully, honestly, and impartially
discharge the duties of my office
discharge the duties of my office
as member of the Advisory Commission
as a member of the Advisory Commission
on the implementation
on the implementation
of Issue 23
of Issue 23
of the City of Nelsonville.
of the City of Nelsonville.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
So I believe Mr. Tolliver as acting city manager, just so per the charter, is an ex officio member of this commission. He can participate in discussions, but he does not have the right to vote. I believe he had prepared and circulated an agenda for today. I guess I'm going to have to.
Do you need a copy of it?
Hang on, let me open it.
So the first item on the agenda is going to be to nominate a chairperson for this committee. I don't know how much additional, is there much in the way of additional responsibilities for the chairperson other than kind of helping dictate a schedule, calling meetings?
Devin, why don't you just go ahead and call this meeting to order?
Okay. All right, so it's February 5th, 2025. We'll call the first meeting of the ad hoc committee for the implementation of issue 23 to order. We have 5 members present here. Could everyone just go around and introduce yourselves in case anyone watching doesn't know who you are?
Joanne LaRue.
Ann Appleton.
Laura Blankenship.
Reed Courtney.
Neil Summers.
And then Mr. Terry Coons was unable to attend today. So our first piece of business is going to be to nominate a chairperson for the committee.
I'll nominate Joanne LaRue.
I can second.
Is that Mr. Summers?
Yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Who was that?
Are there any other nominations? Okay, Devin, you want to call the roll?
Yeah, Joanne,
Yes.
Ann,
Yes.
Laura,
Yes.
Reed.
Yes.
Okay, so, what that means is, as chair, Ms. LaRue is responsible for conducting the meetings in an orderly fashion. She can and will make rulings as chair. If anyone on the commission disagrees with the ruling, you can raise a point of order to have the whole commission either vote to affirm or reverse her decision, but she's the one who has that authority to ensure that the meetings are conducted in an orderly fashion. The other item, so the next item on the agenda, Ms. LaRue, is the nomination for the committee
I
clerk.
passed out all my agendas.
Pass that over to you, please.
I'm sorry.
What I would suggest is, if there's a motion to appoint me to be the temporary clerk for this meeting, to keep the minutes.
Is there a motion to appoint Jonathan Rowe to keep minutes for this meeting?
I'll second that.
Just go ahead and call
All right, Ann, what do I say? Do
To
you
appoint,
agree?
to appoint.
To appoint him, what's
Temporary.
your vote, temporary?
Yes.
Laura? Yes. Reed?
Yes.
Neil?
Yes.
Joanne? Yes.
I can help do that, I just was, let you know. Okay. The next item, is the receive updates from the acting city manager and or law director. Devin, what are your introduction? I'm gonna have a hard time typing it on. I'll just follow the recording.
Yeah, that would be best.
Do you want me to?
Yeah, if you want to start, and then I'll go on anything.
Sure, I guess I'm a little off screen. So, I guess here's the first thing that I would say, to the commission. So as you know, from the authorizing, legislation, this commission's been established to figure out how to implement the transition in the form of government, on issue 23. Council has also separately instructed me and directed me to take whatever steps are necessary to facilitate that instruction. I take that duty very seriously. There are a host of issues, I think, to work through to facilitate that transition. And so I appreciate the commission taking time to serve the public on that regard. There are some issues this commission may not be able to solve, particularly if it pertains to litigation, because I kind of have to wear two hats. One is as the legal counsel to this commission, and then, but also as counsel to the city if it's involved in any litigation that may or may not come up from other parties. So the reason I say that is when I'm wearing my litigation hat, I have to make arguments in support and defense of the city in the litigation, which may be different from what I'm telling the commission, because where my litigation representative hat, I have to defend the city's interest no matter what within the law. Here I can be more free and kind of explain to you my advice or suggestions, and then the commission can take that however that they want. So if you see in a court filing something that kind of deviates from here, that's wise, because I have to make the best arguments for the city in the litigation. Here I can be more free and kind of describing to you how we can accomplish solutions to the various challenges that we face. So that's one thing. The second thing, and I just wanted to make sure that the commission's aware, I have already advised and notified the city council I won't be available for any appointment after December 31st of this year. There are a number of reasons for that. One of which is one of the items that this commission will need to consider is what to recommend for the salary of the elected law director. And just so you know, I'm going to advise this commission that should be a well-compensated position. It would not be appropriate for me to give that advice when I would be the one taking that. Because right now, my salary is set by contract because it's an appointed position. So there's a give and take, there's a negotiation that I have with council. But the elected law director under the statutory form that salary is set by law. And it wouldn't be appropriate for me to say, oh, I think it should be X amount, when then it would be me receiving that salary. Yes.
I understood that it had to be, the law director for the new commission had to be from Nelsonville.
Correct. And I don't live in Nelsonville.
Well, what happens if we don't have any that will do it?
There is a provision in the statute for a temporary appointment. I was going to get at the specifics about that later, but that's a concern of mine. And so we're going to have to kind of hash out some of those details. I can certainly talk about that now, Chair, or if you would like me to, but
Why don't we talk about it while we're thinking about it?
Sure. So under the charter, as I'm sure you're aware, the law director, city attorney position is appointed by the city manager, subject to a confirmation vote by council. The salary for that position is set by contract negotiated between the attorney and the city. It's expressly set forth in the contract that the city attorney does not have to provide any legal services to the school district. Okay. Under the statutory form of government, the law director is an elected position, and as Chair LaRue correctly pointed out, you can only be an elected officer if you're a law.
Elector of the jurisdiction.
Correct,
Yeah.
and have residency, 1-year residency prior to the election. Because it's an elected position, there's no contract, your salary set by law.
And is that an ORC where that is set, or is that something?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I don't have the specific reference, revised code reference in front of me, but I can certainly get that for the commission. One other wrinkle is by statute, an elected law director does have to provide free legal services to the school district. The school district doesn't have to use the law director, but they have that option. And the statute's clear that it's free to the school district. So that's just something to keep in mind in terms of setting the compensation for the elected law director. It won't just be the duties to the city. There will also be potentially work that would have to be provided to the school district. Absent a conflict, there are, about a year ago, I was appointed special counsel by the city of Athens to deal with an issue with their civil service rules that implicated the school district, and there was a conflict situation, so they needed someone else other than the city law director. But the reason that came up is because the Athens city law director is by law the legal counsel for the Athens city school.
I have a question.
Yes.
So the school district at this point, do they have an attorney?
So my understanding is that
Probably through association, right?
Say again?
that when they, yes, so when from time to time when they need legal services, they separately engage. That's typically what most school districts do anyway when there's a very significant matter anyway. But
Is that like under like an hourly contract?
almost certainly, yes.
Yeah.
So the challenge here with specifically with the law director role is who's eligible to run.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this. I only know of, well, Michael Nolan's not an attorney any longer. He's no longer a member of the bar, and Jared Tudor is the only other JD I know in the city of Nelsonville, and he's running Hawken College. He's number 2 over there. So this has been something I've been thinking very seriously about. And if those eligibilities for officers set by ORC, that's not something we can answer in this commission. We can make recommendations, or we can go to the legislature and ask for, special consideration for that. But that's a big issue to try to change in statute.
Right. So I think probably the solution for that is just going to have to be, there's going to have to be a temporary appointment. Now, as I've indicated, I'm not available to serve in that role because I don't want to create a
Conflict of interest,
Correct.
ethics issues, yeah.
I'm certainly willing to help locate someone to serve in that, that temporary appointment for the law director until someone who's eligible to run can be elected. I'm certainly willing to assist in locating someone. I've kind of begun a little bit of work reaching out, but it's in the very early stages, and of course, it's still have about a year for that, so there's not really anything to provide as a particular update. But that's something that's particularly concerning to me because the city does need to have legal representation, particularly as we continue, like even after the transition's kind of accomplished, there will still be significant legal issues to work through. there any other questions about the law director issue? If I may, let me just kind of give a little bit of an overview of my concern of kind of some of the high level legal issues working through here. So if you look at the language of issue 23, and I guess I should have copies to distribute to us, but here, let me just pull it up and
But it's only a couple sentences, right? I mean, it's.
correct.
A lot of detail.
Let me pull it up, because I want to make sure to accurately, I don't want to inaccurately state the language. Of course, at a 30,000 foot view, issue 23 was to abolish the charter and return the city to the statutory form of government. My principal concern with it was that the language, and I don't say this as a criticism to the drafters of the ballot measure, it's just my concern is it's kind of a little lean on the transitional directions.
Yeah, the current city does not have the authority to abolish its own charter, and like, right, is that kind of the question?
Well, that's one of it, but,
Yeah.
Well, okay, let me just read the language and then we can
Yeah, that'd be
get
helpful.
into it. So it says 23 proposed ordinance by petition, city of Nelsonville. A majority affirmative vote is necessary for passage. Shall the charter of the city of Nelsonville, Ohio, submitted to the electors of the city of Nelsonville on November 8, 1994, which became effective January 1, 1995, and its subsequent amendments be abolished and returned to the same form of government as it had prior to and up to January 1, 1995, to be effective January 1, 2026. Upon approval of this initiative submitted to the electors of the city of Nelsonville at the general election on November 5, 2024, the election of all city offices which were required by the form of government of Nelsonville, Ohio prior to January 1, 1995 shall be elected during the municipal elections of 2025. Those elected shall take office on January 1, 2026. Shall the proposed ordinance to abolish charter and return to the same form of government as it had prior to be adopted, be adopted? And then of course the yes or no. One question, and I'm just flagging this issue and then I'll provide what I think could be the solution to this question. If you notice, the language only references the general election. It doesn't reference the primary election. That's a potential problem. Now, what a court probably would say is, oh, well, the language that shall be elected during the municipal election of 2025 includes not just the general election, but the primary election. But because, the reason I'm flagging this, because it doesn't explicitly say the primary election, does that mean that any results of the primary election in this May are not valid?
Do you have any thoughts on that?
Continue, please.
Like I said, the likeliest solution that the court would try to read the primary election into that, but because it only explicitly says the general election, there is a risk that there could be some uncertainty on that point. Not that anyone would be, and the reason that that's a problem, let's suppose somebody who goes through the primary election and then on the general election wins in the general election, but then someone on council refuses to step aside from their seat. That's going to create litigation in 2026.
Mhm.
Now, I'm not saying that that's going to happen. I have no reason to believe that that will be the case, but there's that is a risk.
And that's kind of what the referendum, which is gonna be on the May 5th ballot now, through last week, would try to avoid that because you just repeal issue 23 wholesale if that passes.
Correct.
And that way, issue 23 doesn't exist. It never happened if this new ordinance passes on in 90 days
Correct.
now, so.
Correct. So that was one big, of course, that was Devin's proposal. And I don't want to put words in his mouth, but my understanding is that's precisely why he was proposing that was to solve this problem. Another problem he was trying to solve is, so the litigation, the court decisions, as the commission I'm sure is aware, there was the litigation last year about putting issue 23 on the ballot. The issue in that litigation was only what are the proper procedures for putting issue 23 on the ballot. The city had argued the constitutional procedures and only the constitutional procedures apply. The courts ruled differently. The reason the city argued that was actually, this is a little ironic, the city was actually arguing in court for limitations on council's authority. Because if something's done under the constitutional procedures, council has no authority to change, modify, whatever. They have to just accept it. They're the servant of the people. They have to honor the Constitution. Like, as just like members of this commission, members of council took an oath to support the Constitution of Ohio. They can't take an action contrary to the Constitution of Ohio. The problem, though, was the court said, oh, it can be on the ballot under the charter provisions. Well, if the charter procedures apply, then all of the charter procedures apply. I think that's part of the logic, actually, of the 4th District, the Court of Appeals ruling. The problem is section 10.06 of the charter says anything that's approved via the charter initiative procedures are subject to future action by council, just like any ordinance or resolution passed by council. Well, guess what? Any ordinance or resolution passed by council is subject to repeal by council. So my concern is, and this was also Devin's concern, is the way that this went, council technically could just repeal issue 23.
Yeah.
That's not,
Or make any amendments to it they want as well.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's under their authority that, under the current charter,
Right.
council's the ultimate legislative
So-
and technically executive authority for the city. I mean,
In theory, if they can make amendments to it, can't they just vote and amend it to solve these issues?
well, you have the problem that 70% of electors voted in favor of it, and
Yeah,
that's,
But,
I mean,
so what you started with was the primary issue was if it's in the primary election or not, right?
right, because right now under the charter, there is no primary, because primaries are
So-
partisan elections.
So-
And under the charter, all of the offices are not.
City council can vote, change the verbiage on that, and we can move forward with issue 23 the way we all wanted it to and the way the voters voted for it to happen. Council can just change the verbiage and make this pretty darn easy just to move forward,
Sure.
correct?
Yes, although remember, that action would be subject to a future council action that could amend it again. So the challenge is to get something that is not subject to any kind of future council action. Like basically lock in stone the change and transition in form of government, if that makes sense, such that council cannot change it. Now, the reason, there is the pending Supreme Court litigation that council had authorized. As I've said before publicly, I doubt the Supreme Court would take the case. They may, if they do take the case, they may provide some guidance on this, but part of, and again, I don't mean to put words in Devin's mouth, but my understanding is his proposal is to, because it would be under the constitutional procedures, it would affect the change such that council could never have any authority or power to try to change it, amend it, repeal it, or whatever. The transition would be accomplished. Now, the way that council voted to put his amendment on does retain the charter. It switches to an elected mayor, elected council. It mimics the statute in every way except keeping the charter. It does keep the charter in place.
and then that also would give the city, the ability for that law director issue or whatever other elected office there is, we could still say, because we would have home rule at that point, we have our own charter, we're not subject to ORC in the way that we were a statutory jurisdiction.
Sure.
Right? We could.
Right. It would still be appointed, just again, couldn't.
Yeah, it would be exactly what what your arrangement is now, obviously with
With a
a
different-
potentially different
correct.
individual filling that.
Yeah, the goal was to affect the wishes and then keep the city able to be flexible.
Yes, yeah, have our own, have home rule, I mean, that's.
One, and this maybe is going to Mr. Summers' question, in more detail. One concern that I had, so if you look at the charter, the charter did have a pretty significant, Article 12 was its transitional, authority. Basically what that article did was it provided for the transition from the statutory form of government back in 1994 to the fully fledged charter. So Article 12, technically it's part of the charter, but it's not really applicable today because it was dealing with that transition in 1994. The transitional language there was actually quite broad to make sure that council had full authority to accomplish the transition. There was also some very helpful language in there. For example, the police department or the fire department. The language in the charter for that was, and I think it's not quite word for word, but close to it, was the police department as it exists now shall continue to exist. So under the charter form of government, there's a police department. Under the statutory form of government, there's a police department. But technically, legally, they're not the same because the authorizing law is different. When the charter is dead, the charter police department ceases to exist. And the statutory police department then comes into existence. And to the extent that the new statutory council needs to make provision for that, the problem is there could be delays. Would the new statutory council meet at midnight on January 1st, 2026 to establish all this on an emergency basis?
Yes. Right?
Well, I mean, that's, if the current count, right, Mr. Rope, if I'm understanding right, the current council doesn't have any authority to do any of the things that we need to make sure these critical services keep moving, keep operable in the city. So if we don't do anything, and if, you know, the May 5th referendum that we have now doesn't pass, that's the only option. Like, that's the legal reality we're looking at.
Mhm.
And that's, in terms of just good government, that is not. I
Right,
mean,
so,
It's a huge risk.
Yeah, exactly.
so
Because they could decide they don't want to meet.
one thing that I'm,
Some of you will leave up to
And yeah,
chance.
and, you know, if, you know, God forbid that if emergency services are needed and then something happens to someone in the employee of the city, there's, you know, what about insurance? What about liability coverage? What about, you know, God forbid, any number of things?
It's a huge what about?
Well, it's a huge
Yeah.
risk and it's dereliction, honestly.
Well,
We
and-
can't let that happen.
right, so one thing, this obviously doesn't, so I'm just the city, the way I like to tell people is, I don't get to pick the bucket, I don't get to pick the color of the bucket, how big the bucket is, I don't get to pick what we put in the bucket or how much. I'm just told, here's the bucket, Jonathan, there's where we need to carry it, you carry the bucket over there. And as long as the law says you can't, as long as the law says, oh yes, it's fine to carry the bucket over there, I'm gonna do that. I'm just a bucket carrier though. And so, I can't solve those problems. I can certainly facilitate it. And one thing that I've told Devin, if I need to, I'll just prepare a stack of legislation to pass on to the new council and say, hey, I think this is what you need to do to, and it needs to be done ASAP to ensure the continuity of government services to the people. But I can't implement those myself. And the problem is, as Mr. Courtney was saying, I do think, so the charter, it still exists. We have a date of death. It's kind of strange to know what a specific date of death is, but that's what we have. We have a date of death certain for the charter under issue 23. But we're still under the charter's still alive. It's on life support, but it's alive. The charter is the constitution of the city. The statutory form of government is an alternative constitution. You cannot have two constitutions at the same time. And so the problem is council only has the authority that the charter gives it. We can't just kind of go, oh, well, let's grab this other stuff from this other constitution. Oh, now we have the authority. I don't believe that that's appropriate or lawful. And certainly would be a basis for someone to challenge that action by the current charter council.
So my question is, moving forward, what steps do we need to take to best do what the city voters voted for? What, can we create a list? You know, like, for lack of a better term, a solid punch list?
Yes.
Yeah.
And actions to go with that on what we need to take, step by step, where we need to start.
And what would be helpful with that is, for me, understanding a little more the difference between the statutory requirements versus what the charter currently, like, what is the city of Nelsonville currently doing? What does the state of Ohio require a city to do
Sure.
under Title VII or whatever that is in ORC? What, kind of just compare and contrast, like fourth grade style, what are the differences? And then I think that's how we identify what those holes are.
Yeah, let's just start
Yeah.
figuring out exactly what we need to do and fixing it.
So to Mr. Summers' question, like when I was describing the language in the charter for the continuity of the police department, basically what we're looking for is a reverse Uno card. Basically reverse that language back from charter land back into statutory form of government land. I do think the cleanest way to do that is to submit a ballot measure to the people. And it could be in the form of Mr. Tolliver's proposal. It could also, there are different ways to skin that cat. One could just be a simple ballot measure that just says the current council has authority to effectuate transitions subject to the new statutory council changing it once they take office.
So what would the venue for that be then? Because we're 90 days from the 5th.
Right.
Ohio doesn't have August elections any longer. Those were eliminated a couple years ago, right?
Right.
So how much would it cost the city just to do a city, municipal election?
So I don't know for sure what the total cost of having a city-specific special election. It would obviously be substantial because the county would charge the city for that. My recommendation, and this is based on the Ohio Constitution, my recommendation would be that the city, in full transparency to the people, mail to every registered voter the text of the ballot measure so that they have time to review it before going. That alone will cost thousands of dollars in mailing costs. But my thought is to effectuate the will of the people, money's not the point. The point is serve the people, transparency, full opportunity to be aware of the information. So beyond that, I don't know the specific amount that the county would charge for a city-specific special election.
What was that, Joe?
Did you check with the Board of Elections yesterday to find out how much it would cost?
No, I don't.
I have told the city auditor, and this is kind of a back of the envelope estimate, but I think the cost to facilitate the transition will be $250,000 for the city. That includes the possibility, in that estimate, I include the costs of a special election. That's not the only cost, but that's probably the principal driver. And it's not just the cost of printing the ballots or holding special election. There's also the cost of what I'll call the transparency objectives of like mailing all of the items to the registered voters, because we want to facilitate their access to information, and that's the means that the Constitution says. The Constitution does make a provision potentially for posting it in a paper, but again, that's not really how many people get their information anymore these days.
Well, the paper
Social
doesn't even come
media.
out frequently anymore.
Posted it on the city's website,
Yes.
city's Facebook page,
Yes.
Houses independent.
emailing it.
So the point there is, what we're trying to do is accomplish the will of the people in the proper and lawful measures so that we know for sure there's no way that council could revisit, undo, redo, or whatever, if that makes sense. Because remember, the people and only the people have the right to choose a form of government for the city. I don't have that. Devin doesn't have that, the commission doesn't have that right. Council doesn't have that right. It's the people and only the people, but the problem is, if there were defects in the procedures, we're just kicking the can down the road in terms of problems, legal liabilities. I mean, let me put it this way, just to go back to the police department, with that transition part, there is a concern that folks may challenge, starting next year, challenge each and every action the police department takes. Problem is, that's third parties. We have no control over the third parties. That's something that needs, that's why I'm like, I wasn't being tongue in cheek, I was actually being serious. Does the new statutory council need to meet at midnight on January
And
1st?
authorize the existence of the
Correct.
police department and fire department. and
Correct.
Those things.
Now, the only way I can think of to solve that problem, again, going back to Mr. Summers' question, is if there's a ballot measure that just, again, it could be Mr. Devin's proposal, or sorry, Mr. Tolliver's proposal. Or it could be something that's different, like briefer language, but broader language, like council now has full authority to, something needs to be put in place, or we're going to face that midnight issue. And again, I'm not saying someone's going to, do that worst case scenario of challenging everything that the police department does. But there's no way right now under current law to foreclose that risk, and it's my duty to advise the commission as to worst case scenario. Like, I can't come in and go, oh, this is the best case scenario, let's just plan on the best case. I have to present to you the worst case, so that we don't want the worst case to happen, but we
But
need
you've
to.
been in Nelsonville long enough to know better. I'm saying.
They would only be able to challenge that authority until they met and adopted it.
Correct.
So if they didn't meet at midnight and they met at, 12 hours later at noon, there would be a 12-hour gap that opens everybody up to litigation now.
Right.
Because if there's accidents, injuries,
Sure.
police reports to the DUI on.
Well, if a Nelson police officer pulls someone over because they're swerving
Yeah,
over center,
exactly.
they don't have legal authority to do that because they don't exist under statute.
Yes.
So-
Well, and so let me kind of provide two kind of parallel options on the police department. So obviously the police department existed before the charter existed. The question is, well, do we take issue 23 as just going back in time and grabbing the police department that as it existed in 1994? Well, its staffing is significantly different today than it was before. Does that mean come January 1st, half of the police department's laid off? I could see a court saying that that's the case. Now, I don't think that's the best answer. And here's why. So issue 23's language, as we read a few moments ago, says return to the same form of government. I don't think it literally means that, because the the statutory form of government, that's provided for by the legislature in Columbus. They don't ask Nelsonville, what's the best way to write the statutory form of government? They don't ask any other cities. They just say, here's your default. What they, the legislature, in their infinite wisdom, believe is the best thing, which may or may not be the best for each village. The problem is that 1994 statute is not actually what's in place now. It's been amended many times by the legislature since then. So the statutory form of government, the general form of statutory form of government is different than it was in 1994. An example, just in October of 2023, the legislature changed the posting requirements for local legislation. It used to be you had to post it in 5 physical locations around town for 30 days, and then it would become effective. They changed that to eliminate that physical posting requirement. It's now required to be posted on the city's website and the city's social media page. I tend to agree with that change because that's how most people find out about it. It's easier for them to do that than to drive to the gas station and look on the bulletin board, and who knows if it got ripped off. of the bulletin board since it was posted. So that change is good, but the problem is if the city does not strictly follow those posting requirements, that's a like if it's not posted on the Facebook page, that's a basis to overturn an ordinance that's passed by the statutory council. Under the charter, it's just as long as it's complied with the charter procedures, we don't have to worry about the statutory posting. Now, again, the legislature made that change without, it caused a considerable amount of consternation among small villages. You can imagine, particularly in our area of the state, there are a lot of small villages that don't have a website, don't have a Facebook page. Now, all of a sudden, they have to make a complete change in their procedures. They have to figure out, you know, someone who's just used to dealing with paper now all of a sudden has to run a website, or else all their ordinances will get overturned. So that's an example. I think that the best reading of this is just, hey, we're returning to the form of government, the general statutory form of government as it now exists under the statute, because that 1994 version of the statute does not exist anymore. It doesn't. And it's dead. And it was dead the moment that the charter was adopted. The law will not permit a zombie, is the way that I think of this. And obviously you don't want a zombie because you can't control a zombie. You can resurrect the statutory form of government, no question about that. But it's the statutory form of government as it exists in statute today, not the 1994 version. That's what I think is the best answer. Now, could a court disagree with me? It's plausible, but again, that raises all the zombie problems. The staffing size for the police department. It's possible that I could come up with the salaries for the elected offices is another one of the problems. So the charter does not give the charter council authority to set salaries or make any provision, in fact, for a statutory office, a statutory elected mayor. What that means is, I think the best reading of the law, again, the law does not permit a zombie, is that by default, the mayor's salary will be $0 when the mayor is sworn in on January 1st of 2026. Well, state law is very clear. You cannot change an elected official's salary mid-term, which means that the elected mayor will serve at a $0 salary for 4 years. Now, that's what I think is the best reading of the law. Now, a court could say, well, we'll just go back to the salary for the mayor that existed in 1994. That one was something like somewhere between, I think, $12,000 and $20,000 a year. That's not enough for an elected mayor to live off of, obviously, considering all the duties that the mayor would have. Of course, that's better than zero.
It's not mayor part-time.
Correct. Right. The charter technically would give flexibility to have a part-time mayor if that's what the voters wanted. Under the statutory form of government, you have to have a.
Nobody's gonna want to do it for $0 for 4 years.
So pretty much the best solution moving forward would be to write an issue that updates, well, pretty much abolishes issue 23, but still does what people voted for. So we come up with a new issue, we write in there that, you know, this is to replace issue 23, and then we write it in legal terms to move forward with what the people want.
Yes.
And in order to do that, we have to have a special election, and we're unsure of the cost of that.
Correct.
So that would be our first step moving forward, would be writing a new issue.
Which,
Correct.
yeah, if this on the 5th passes, it gives us more breathing room, but for our purposes, this doesn't exist. Yeah.
Yes,
And
right.
I'm agreeing with you as
So,
well. Yeah.
so who, are you able to draft up the new issue?
If the commission instructs me to do it, I will obey the instructions.
Okay, so that's the best, and with your opinion, is that the best way moving forward?
I think it's better, significantly better than the current state of affairs, yes.
Okay, so why don't we draft up an issue? I mean, we can vote on, I make a motion that we draft up a new issue that fits all the legal terms that we wanted in issue 23, but just didn't quite get to satisfy the will of the people of the city of Nelson.
That seems very reasonable. What do you think?
No, I think that it is better than nothing, and I think that that is the extent the authority that we have, is to go back to the voters on things. It's not ideal, but we do need this clarity, like you said, that the form of the government is decided by the people and the electors of Nelsonville alone. So we need to go back to them for clarification on it. So if that's the way that this committee wants to move forward, I think that's the best idea.
What do you see as disadvantages to that?
Well, I mean, we're leaving things up to an election, and we need clarity and stability. And, what I'm afraid of is that we're gonna end up putting this, this issue on the 5th doesn't pass. We do another special election, it doesn't pass. And then we're staring down the barrel of a gun, with a month to go before that midnight deadline. But that's where we're at. We can't.
But if we do an issue, we can still move forward as if it's gonna pass as a committee.
Yeah, we can have.
And we can start moving forward with everything we need to do. And then if it
And then
If it
when people
passes,
see
we're-
that-
we haven't
that
lost any
We're listening
time.
to them and we're following it and we're doing things,
yes.
then we can get people really understanding what they're on board for.
We also really need to be heavy on transition planning.
Right,
Transition
so-
planning
yeah.
is a huge focus.
A simple example, this commission can be, while we're waiting for that special election to be held, this commission can go through all of its agenda, like salaries and how to set up. All of that can be done and be continuing work in progress. So it's not like after today, all of a sudden, hey, we can go home. I mean, there's a lot of work for this commission. to
We
do.
continue to move forward as issue 23 was written perfect and there was no legal issues.
To make it what it should have been.
Correct.
I can see the usual misinformation being spread on social media. And you're trying to overturn what we voted for.
I think the transparency is the main thing that is important to me.
Yeah.
That I understand what you're saying, Laura, that, people are gonna come out with some negative comments and things. But I think we're proactive, we're transparent, we make it very clear. Sending the letters out to every registered voter, I think it's a wonderful idea. There has to be some clarity, there has to be some transparency, or we're gonna be looked at as not being fair to somebody. And I think we want to be fair. We want to honor what the voters of Nelsonville decided on. But unfortunately, the language was rather vague. And
Non-inclusive.
yeah, and
yes.
so, I mean, I am in favor of this. I am not that familiar with the funds that Nelsonville has and how the amount of the special election would cost, but I think.
I think it would be
Give or
cheaper than
take,
a
we
lawsuit if we
Yeah.
don't do it correctly.
Yeah,
By far.
Absolutely,
So-
and that this is these are public dollars that would be spent on this, and it's been a public decision to get to the point where we're at. So, I mean, like, I told it, I'm a fiscal conservative, I understand the need to, protect and make sure that public money is being spent wisely, but with the public decisions have gotten us to a point where this is the responsible way and cheaper option of public expenditure. So if the council decides to go that way.
No, I agree. I just think, again, transparency is one of the main things that we really need to focus on. So people are aware that we are not just trying to blow up Nelsonville or, change people's minds about things, get people to vote different ways. That we are doing it because we want to honor the vote of the people.
Well, I think that the operative thing now is what are those emergency questions the legal issues that we need to solve? What do we need public input on to be able to head those things off? And concurrently, what we can do is start looking at that, between Article 12 and charter statutory form, get that punch list started. And I think that for a little while, those two things are gonna happen concurrently. I mean, it's just fact finding and identifying where the holes are.
It sounds like you've got experience in that.
Not any more than anybody else, just with,
Well,
I've
we would disagree with that.
I've worked in government for most of my life,
Yeah.
and, I have, I'm not an attorney, but I practice law in a way, so, I have an understanding of it, so, not any expertise though.
I've got one thing I would like to say about this committee. I view it as a circle, and each person on that committee, the 6, have a certain role to do. And from what anybody has said on this committee, even Terry, who's not here, there hasn't been one me and I and me and I. It's been Nelsonville. And it's about time that we come together and do what is good for the city of Nelsonville.
One thing, Chair LaRue,
Yes.
if I may, I think the design of this commission to have 6 members facilitates that, because rather than trying to, count heads and go, oh, I got a majority, I think councils to be commended for having an even number to basically ensure consensus. So I think I very much appreciate the commission's consensus-driven approach.
I think we all care about the city and want to do. It's got such potential, such potential.
Well, Chair LaRue, did you want to open it up to public comment?
Yes, we have public comment.
Go ahead.
I just have one question.
Yes.
You've indicated all these things that you want to do in a fact finding, when most of your issues would be solved with what the council has now proposed. We're not telling you what to do, how to do it, or anything like that. It's just a proposal, but it checks everything that you need to get this to move ahead. And by the way, I love all you guys being here, and I thank you so very much from the council and from me. And I spoke for them just now. Anyway, but that's just something to think about. I'm not telling you this is a have to. And I saw the gentleman over here going, so it's just reread what it says. And if it does not take care of everything that you want, then, and in the meantime, go ahead and do what you need to do.
Chair LaRue, if I might
Yeah.
respond to that, I totally understand where you're coming from, and I was excited when I saw you're referring to the May 5th ordinance, right, the referendum. I like what I saw there, and I think that's a step in the right direction, but from, where the legal reality, as I understand it, is that we're operating under issue 23, and I want to leave as little to chance as possible. So, if this gets adopted, I don't think this commission, I think the council probably look at getting rid of this commission that we're sitting on right now, right? Because we are implementing issue 23. If the May 5th issue passes, issue 23 doesn't exist. We don't have a purpose for this group any longer. I don't think that the governance woes of the city of Nelsonville are finished at that point. I think there's still going to be a lot of people who are going to want to see some change, and I think there's probably going to be growing pains with instituting a charter mayor under that new ordinance. But I think we need to hedge bets as much as possible on every front. And I know that I'm going to be looking at this as we're talking about a transition plan. So
You kind of said something there that is absolutely not true. The council decided on this commission because we did not want to make the decisions for those 70% of people who voted. So what we're doing is offering, if you read it, an idea of things that could happen if passed. The council now, how long is it going to take you to get everything together? Will you be able to do it by May the 5th? That's my only thing. And we would never disband this commission just because we want to.
Well,
Think about it, we were the ones that asked this commission to come together. The council did. So there's nothing said about disbanding. And I don't know where you're getting it.
Ma'am, if I can just show room, if I may, ma'am, I'm not saying you are. I'm just saying that if this ordinance passes, my understanding of this commission's our express purpose is to implement issue 23. If the May 5th referendum passes, that is written in the language of that referendum, that issue 23 is repealed in whole. So then we don't have a purpose to meet. We have to have that purpose restated, what this committee's purpose is, correct? Because if issue 23 doesn't exist, we don't have anything to implement.
So the official name of this commission is the Advisory Commission on the Implementation of Issue 23. I mean, it's in the names that were.
Yeah, I'm not accusing your council of anything. I'm not trying to pick fights here. I'm just stating what my
I don't wanna
understanding.
fight.
I'm just understanding what my understanding of the situation is, and you know the variety of outcomes that we could be seeing over the next 8 months.
If I may, Nelsonville City Council President Greg Clement here. And I want to thank everyone deeply for participating in this. The ballot issue going on in May, if it passes, most certainly will face legal challenges. So this commission will be in place, I see, for quite some time. Because once the challenge is put in place, that doesn't mean issue 23 went away until the court decides the legality of the challenge. So there's going to be a lot of work to be done this year. That could carry on for quite some time.
Mr. President, Mr. Robe, is the potential legal challenge the manner in which it was put on the ballot, or what is the, if it is adopted, what is the standing or the damage?
Sure, so, I had just told the commission a few moments ago, I think the best interpretation of the charter, specifically section 10.06, means that any charter initiative issue is subject to revisit by council. I think the charter is clear on that. The other party that was involved in the litigation strongly disagrees with that interpretation. The problem is that issue's not actually been vetted by the courts. And the reason for that is pre-election, you're only allowed, Ohio law is very clear, you're only allowed to litigate procedural questions. Post-election is when you can litigate what we'll call validity questions, like, is this actually valid? Correct. And so that issue has not been vetted by the courts at all. I know that they've argued in the Supreme Court in the pending case that the city's kind of interpretation of the constraints of the charter don't apply. But again, that goes back to my point. Ironically, it was the city in all this litigation that's arguing we want limits on council's authority. Ironically, it was the other side who was basically saying we don't want any limits on council authority legally. That's probably the principal legal question that would be litigated. I think, going back to your point though, I think some of the procedural questions may arise. I can't speak for the other side and I don't want to speculate, but just reading from their current court filings, that's what I would anticipate. And there may be more issues that they raise. I mean, they get to craft their complaint, so I don't know. And again, I can't speak for them, so I would certainly participate in those.
This is not my area of expertise, I'm just telling you right now.
I guess the one last thing, just to let the commission know, probably what I'll do is work directly with the chair for putting together the agendas for the meeting. Other than that, my general practice is always going to just be communicate with you in these open meetings, but obviously I'll have to, with the chair's permission, contact the chair just to help put together agendas for the.
And then it's okay if I run it by everybody?
Oh, yeah.
I'm just checking.
Yeah, the dates.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what we can do is just collect input and then
Thank you.
you and I can put together the
And then we'll
agenda.
go from there. I'll take care of you. Okay.
So,
But just don't make any discussions about decisions except in
Yeah.
an open.
We're just to make recommendations to
Right.
council, right? I mean, it's up to the council whether to put it on the agenda, right?
Correct.
So we wouldn't call each other up and say, well, what do you think
Correct.
about it? That, that's a no-no
Just do that in these.
in these meetings.
Well, it would be a quorum, that's, so public meeting law does apply to us.
Correct.
Sunshine laws apply to us.
Correct.
How many?
It's considered a public meeting if there's a quorum of this committee discussing, I mean, so one or two could discuss an issue with one another, but it has to be a decision-making
Correct.
authority put
Correct.
together, so we need to have four.
Right.
There need to be 4 members involved in a conversation for it to be considered public meeting.
Thank you.
So, if all 4 of you happen to go, be in Kroger at the same time, make sure you don't talk about.
Yeah.
What about if 2 of us are friends and do things together and socialize?
That doesn't count as a public meeting, so you're certainly allowed to discuss, and you're certainly allowed as a member of the commission to talk to other people who aren't members and.
Like in the city.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm not.
But, certainly don't, anytime there's a quorum and you start discussing about this, that renders it a public meeting, and we don't want to have any illegal public meetings.
No, we don't want anything illegal.
So I would just, my recommendation would just be, hey, it's just no more than, just make sure to be aware of
I
that.
could think 2, and then if we make a mistake with 3, we're still okay.
Sure.
Okay, so looking at the agenda today, I would say public comments, unless there's anything else.
I would like to ask one question. So under public records requests, would the notes that they take and make subject to public records requests?
No, so the notes that,
I just wanted to
that
clarify
you all
that.
are taking, your personal notes,
Mhm.
my recommendation would be keep those because you need those as you conduct your duties, but don't share them with each other. If they're just your personal notes, they're just your personal notes, and they're not a public record. They're not a public record. But if you were to share it and it would become a basis for a decision that can render your personal notes a public record.
If they can figure out what I've written, I would be really happy.
So just be cognizant of that.
That's a good point, though. That's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, there's gonna have to be dialogue between individuals throughout, I mean, we're not gonna sit here and draft a report on one another, there's gonna be work that happens outside of these meetings. So I just wanted that clarification, I mean, we would be completely paralyzed if, I couldn't call you, you couldn't call, like, that would be a mess.
Right, now, the one thing you're not allowed to do, so the law, the public records, the Open Meetings Act doesn't permit what they call serial meetings, which would be like.
Yeah,
if you
yeah.
start calling one at a time.
Yeah,
and
we
then-
get coffee every Wednesday at 9 o'clock before the meeting and talk about it,
Right,
yeah,
yeah.
Oh, that's not allowed?
no, that's,
You can certainly have informal discussion like one,
Okay, I wouldn't do it, but
Um,
I just,
and of course, each member of the commission is free to, on their own time, come up with whatever proposal they want to. Of course, if the commission tells me, Jonathan, draft this particular, I'll do that. That's my duty, but that doesn't stop any one of you members from saying, well, I don't like that, I want to do a different proposal myself. You're certainly allowed to do that. And the commission would then discuss it, and then they could always say, hey, Jonathan, we like this with these changes, you make these changes and we'll adopt them. Whatever the
we
commission
could
tells me.
involve you at that point.
Oh, yeah, the commission, whatever instructions the commission gives to me, I have the duty to obey. But that's not a constraint on any of you as members of the commission.
So if our notes are personal notes, and we can have like, I could have a one-on-one conversation with Joanne or, or whatever. What about, like, the email? Something that's documented. Is that
That
my
would
personal?
That would not be personal at that
Okay.
point.
I wouldn't send text.
Yeah, it would be safer not to send text. I mean, I know, Mr. Tolliver started an email chain. My suggestion would be just keep the email chain to scheduling meetings and circulating agendas and all the discussion, keeping the public meeting, not the email.
I don't think anybody would intentionally do that because,
No, it's a,
No,
I don't
but we
think
don't want to
anybody-
mess up anything
Yeah,
either.
no one here would intentionally break the law. Yeah, that's, no one in this room would do that. So I think that on our agenda, point number 7, that's the operative that we need to really hone in on, to make sure this was worth doing this afternoon. So I think number 1 in my mind for that, things that we need is, I would like to, like I said earlier, develop a better understanding of what is the current charter of the city of Nelsonville look like? What are the services provided? What are the obligations of the city under it? The ORC, what are the services and obligations provided under a statutory form of government? So we can put those against each other and look where those holes are between the two. Because Mr. Rowe, like you said, we cannot go back to 1994 statute because that statute doesn't exist. The General Assembly has done a lot of things in the last, 30 years. So, I don't know what the best way to present that is. I would be fine looking for that, having a copy of the charter, having a copy of, Title 7 or whatever the statute is, and being able to just, do the hard work of actually looking at that and reading them both.
I think you would be gifted at doing that.
I hope. So I think that's for me what I need looking forward. And obviously we have the overarching questions of, what are salaries? We can't have a volunteer mayor if it comes to that. And I think the city, that $60,000 number is a fair start for that. And we can look at that and think about that later on, but immediately I think we need to understand what those rules are.
Would the auditor and treasurer under statutory government still be elected or?
Yes, they would be elected. I think the best reading of issue 23 is that it wants all elected office holders to be reelected, even though their term would not be up. So the treasurer, even though his term under the charter is not up, I do believe the treasurer would have to run again this
If
fall.
the charter is being abolished, so that office no longer exists.
Correct. So that also poses a little bit of a challenge because, as you know, Mr. Sappington was elected to be the county treasurer.
Term begins in September.
Right, so he's going to be leaving in September, that's going to be a challenge finding a replacement for him.
Do we have an interim for those 2 months?
We would need to have actually 4 months because the
Yeah.
statutory don't take office until the first of the year.
Council approve that?
So the charter says the city manager is to make an appointment for a vacancy.
Could I say, so that's under the charter form of government,
Correct.
right? So that's not our problem to deal with, right?
Correct.
That's not our commission's problem to deal
Well-
with, the city council.
Correct.
So
That's a
I,
council problem, yes.
as a member of this committee, I'm gonna say, let's put that aside and not think about that right now.
Sure.
So, Mr. Rowe, would you be able to do get the charter and send the statute to us? For me, electronic is fine, I can get that printed off and.
I can do that.
That's it.
Is that all our email?
Yes, I'll just email it.
I can print an extra copy for you, Laura. Is I allowed to do that?
Or if anyone has issues getting printing, you can come to City Hall, it's for city purpose, we can
Okay,
help you get copies too.
Yes.
And
Especially if it's gonna be a
I'm not gonna
lot
like
of paper.
would that
it.
just
I'm not glad to
get hold of Susan and ask her to do that?
They just stop them. Get simple money as well. I can help anyone here do it. Susan's not here on a daily basis.
One other thing, just to make sure that we don't forget it, the authorizing legislation for this commission does permit, each member to be paid a monthly salary of $100 per month for their service. So do expect some communication from the auditor's office to get that.
We can waive that, right?
You can certainly waive that, or you could waive it even by donating it back to the city.
Okay.
If that's up to you.
I would.
Individually. Yeah, but I can put that kind of comparison chart together.
Yeah, if you can do that, that'd be great, getting your expert opinion on what those holes are, but yeah, I think also just having the actual text and statutes beside each other is really helpful.
And don't forget, you need a clerk. That's
Yeah,
another
that's-
important thing that you're
I
gonna
was,
ask.
I was gonna ask Jonathan, is that something, do we need to find somebody or can you continue to serve through that? Because I personally, I don't think it's a good idea to have a member of the commission serve as clerk.
Either,
I agree.
Not-
I think- Yeah, I mean, you're just taking someone out of the conversation at that point. I don't want you to do that either, because I do think you're an asset to have in these conversations.
Devin has a possibility, right?
Yeah, the police department clerk might be interested. She just, I just jumped on her like,
Yeah,
5 minutes
she
before the
needs to
meeting.
think about if it's
Yeah,
gonna
she wanted to
be,
think about it,
she has
so-
a day job to take care of.
Yeah.
Okay, so,
She's already here, I mean, that's true.
what also depends on the type of, the time frame you guys wanna have your
Yeah.
meetings regularly, because they're not gonna be during business hours. That
yeah.
could
I think
affect
11
the
o'clock
decision,
seems
but-
to be, I don't know, because you have different jobs. This is
Yeah,
how
I'm using comp time to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
but we're more free than you are, so you can
Yeah.
pick.
yeah, so, yeah, I'm flexible in my, with my work days. I will say that Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I'm typically traveling for work. So I think that,
Well, then what's good for you, Neil?
evenings would,
Evenings would be preferred.
Which evening of the week, Thursday?
Thursday evening would be fine for me. And we need to, this is helpful. We're not scheduling a meeting now because Terry's not here, but, yeah, I think Thursday evenings for me would.
I know Thursdays are good for Terry usually.
Thursdays are good for me.
I have the daytime.
Thursdays will have to be good for me. Baseball season's kicking off, so I don't know when I'm gonna have time to coach the kids, but I'll make Thursdays work. That's what's good for everybody.
Let's, someone should send an email on that thread after this and just confirm, maybe.
Someone.
So is it Thursday of once a month or?
Oh, no, we're gonna have
Yeah,
to
I
be more
think-
once a
yeah.
month.
Yeah.
At least every other week.
I was gonna
minimum,
say,
say.
that's
So like
what
the
I-
first and
bi-weekly.
third Thursdays?
Those are the same mean, that might work, because council's 7 and 4.
Yeah, that's Tuesdays is when council typically meets Mondays,
Mondays,
okay.
yes.
We take any recommendations to council before
Yeah,
our
what-
commission ends?
Yeah, what is council required in terms of reporting from us?
You mean in terms of if this commission sends anything to council?
Yeah, we have some ideas.
Yeah, so whenever the commission decides it has something it wants to forward to council, that can be done at any time. And that's the sole discretion of this commission, the timing. It just, we would need to formally notify council, and I could certainly facilitate that, but we just have to formally notify council. Council has to then put that on the agenda at their next meeting. Now, whether or not they accept the recommendation
Yeah, right.
is a different question, but they have to consider it. The ordinance requires them to.
What's the timeframe for having to submit something big enough on the agenda?
Typically, something would have to be the Friday prior to the Monday meeting. So meeting the first Thursday, third Thursday would ensure that we can meet that Friday.
So we're thinking first and third Thursdays.
Yeah, so that would mean that,
At what time?
if you wanna call it 6:30 in the evening.
Whatever is convenient for you is,
The earlier the better for me.
Okay.
But
6:30?
So I can do earlier too.
Anybody,
I can do
anybody
earlier,
make
later.
6 o'clock?
5?
Five works for me.
5 works for me,
Five
if you
works
wanna
for
get it
me.
over with earlier.
I don't.
Yeah,
I prefer earlier as well.
5
Because you're
o'clock.
already
Hey,
here,
you
right?
guys are-
Yeah, anytime.
Yeah,
So are we looking at probably the next one being,
It was the 20th.
yeah, Thursday the 20th, maybe?
That'll give us some time to kind of gather these things. I believe you guys touched on this earlier, I was gonna bring it back up, is getting an estimate from the Board of Elections on the cost they would give to the city. Is that information you guys want as well.
Yeah, yeah.
For a special election.
And for organizational purposes, maybe we put that in the agendas in the future as update from city manager, update from city law director. I think that, you know, you don't have to be here the whole time, but if you want to come in and just,
I think that adds to everybody seeing what's going on.
yeah, we need to have an accurate picture of what's the reality is.
Can we still look at drafting a new issue and then we can decide if we want to make that a recommendation or not after it's drafted? Because I fear if we need it, we don't have it pre-written,
Then we push it back.
exactly, it's just gonna delay. We could do something like that, it'd be awesome.
Yeah, so to be clear, the next meeting we would have would be the 20th of this month. That's the
5 o'clock.
So I will try to have not just that comparison, but I can also have some initial prepared language just to have this discussion. And again, please don't ever worry about telling me you want something worded different. Again, my job, I don't get to decide the bucket, the color of the bucket, the size of the bucket, how much water goes in. So if you have any issue with the language or are confused, just let me know. I'm not going to.
Who drafted 23? Well, I don't know, maybe we don't need to know, but if we can find the original intent on issue 23, the way it was drafted, it might help with drafting the new issue to get exactly what people voted for.
I think you saw
in
the
effect.
original.
I think we'll just go back to the mayor.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my understanding, Mr. Robe, is you said that to have all authoritative offices elected, and follow what is a statutory form of government has to look like. Be the intent.
Yeah, that's what I foresee.
We need more details.
We just need to have it written in a legal manner so we're not getting the city in trouble. And we're still
For
giving the people what
ourselves.
they wanted.
Nancy?
May I suggest, when you talk to the people who have initiated 23, be very careful.
I don't think we need to address it now.
I'm not even sure, I mean, to me, I understand what you're saying, trying to know the intent of what the people were, but the vote was the vote.
Exactly.
And we understand.
Yeah, and I think people,
And that's
from
what
my,
we're seeing.
from my
That's what
understanding
we're
is
doing.
people just wanted to go back to a mayor system.
They thought it was really simple and it would be just cut and dry and that would be it.
But they weren't happy with the mayor last time, so we went to the target.
Well, I feel good about where we're at for the 20th. Again, I think we should confirm that, you know, Terry is good for that, before we, you know, make that standing meeting and make that announcement of that next meeting. Mr. Robe, if you could, the actual comparison document, like, I think that would be helpful to have for the next meeting, but before then, I would like to have the text of the statute and the charter. I think that's all I have for today. Someone else has?
Do we have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I'll motion.
A second.
Vote, all in favor, aye?
Yes.
Oh, phew. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay.